It started with rain. Not the polite kind that taps gently on windows, but the heavy, unrelenting kind that soaks through your coat and your bones, the kind that makes the city look like it's trying to rinse itself of something. I had just pulled over outside Rosehill Clinic, parked under a flickering streetlight, engine humming low. My hands were still gripping the wheel, fingers tapping a rhythm I didn't recognize. I wasn't there for an appointment. Not for anyone. Not anymore. I guess I stopped out of habit, a place I once visited too often for reasons I'd rather not think about. I was just about to pull away when the passenger door opened. She didn't knock, didn't hesitate. She climbed in, soaking wet, clutching a bundled baby against her chest like the world might steal him if she blinked. She smelled like rain and fear and baby powder. Her hood was up, but I caught a glimpse of pale skin, brown hair plastered to her cheeks, and eyes, God, those eyes wide and frantic. "Sorry," she gasped, voice breathless. "My ride canceled. I couldn't wait any longer. We need to get to the clinic." He blinked. It took me a second to realize what had just happened. She thought I was her driver. I could have said something then. Should have, probably. But I looked at her, soaked to the skin, cradling a child who wheezed with every breath, and something in me froze. Not out of shock, out of memory. I'd seen that kind of desperation before. In my sister's face, all those years ago. The way she'd rush Liam to the ER, hands shaking, saying, "Please, just help him breathe." The same fevered panic, the same damp clothes clinging to a frame that had skipped too many meals. So I said nothing. I just pulled back into traffic. We rode in silence for a while, the wipers dragging rhythmically across the windshield. I glanced at her in the mirror. Her jaw was clenched, lips pale, her hands pressing the baby tighter to her chest with each rattling cough he made. "Clinic's about 8 minutes out," I said finally, low and steady. She flinched, like she'd forgotten I was there. "Thank you," she murmured. "His name's Liam. He's been sick for days. I couldn't get anyone to cover my shift, so we waited too long. And now," she stopped, breath catching. I didn't answer. I just pressed a little harder on the gas. I didn't know her, but I knew what fear did to a parent. How fast it turned minutes into miles, how guilt settled into your gut like concrete, and how sometimes, just sometimes, the smallest kindness felt like rescue. We pulled up outside the clinic. She moved to get out, then paused. "I'm sorry. I didn't even check if you were my ride. You must think I'm crazy." "No," I said quietly, "just desperate and wet." She gave a laugh, tight, tired, but real, and pushed the door open. "Thank you again," she said. "I'm Rachel, by the way." I nodded. "Jordan." She smiled, brief, grateful, then disappeared into the building with Liam in her arms. I should have driven away, should have gone home and forgotten the whole thing. But I didn't. I sat there, watching the rain blur the clinic windows, remembering another Liam, my nephew, and the night I'd sat in this same spot, helpless as he struggled to breathe. That was the night he didn't make it. So I got out of the car, walked into the clinic, quietly asked the receptionist if a woman named Rachel Monroe had checked in. She had. I didn't ask to speak to her, just pulled out my wallet and paid the bill. She didn't sign my name, didn't want thanks. I just stood in the rain a little longer and drove off, telling myself it was just one small thing, a kindness in passing. I had no idea then what that one ride was about to set in motion. No idea that this woman, this baby, this moment would rearrange everything I thought I knew about loss, about grace, and about love. I told myself I wouldn't see her again, that what I did that day was enough, one good deed in a city that barely notices them, that it wasn't about her, or the kid, that it was about me, and what I owed a ghost I still carried. But people lie to themselves all the time. Some lies feel like healing, others fester. 3 days after that storm, I found myself circling Rosehill Clinic again. No rain this time, just a brittle chill in the air and that same flickering streetlight buzzing overhead. I sat there in the driver's seat, engine idling, wondering what I was doing. Maybe I wanted to see if she was okay. Maybe I just needed to see someone fight through something and still show up. Or maybe, just maybe, I was lonely, the kind that doesn't go away with success or square footage. The door opened, and there she was. Rachel. Her hair was down today, pulled into a loose braid, tired eyes shadowed with exhaustion. She didn't see me. Not yet. She was holding Liam on her hip, his small frame bundled in a second-hand puffer jacket, his little chest still rising too fast. I stepped out of the car without thinking. "Rachel." She turned, startled, then relaxed when she saw me. "Jordan," she said, as if the name had waited on her tongue. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Could ask you the same." She adjusted Liam on her hip. "Follow-up. They said his lungs sound better, but he still needs the nebulizer a few times a day." I nodded, glancing down at the boy. He was watching me with those big, solemn eyes like he already knew too much for his size. "You walking back?" I asked. "I took the bus here," she said, "but we missed the last one headed home." "Get in," I said, nodding toward my car. "I'll drive." She hesitated just long enough for pride to rise. Then it faded. She nodded. "Thanks." We drove in silence for a while. Her neighborhood wasn't far, but it felt like another world. Cracked sidewalks, bars on windows, storefronts half abandoned. A place where people survived more than they lived. As I pulled up outside her building, a slumped brick complex with peeling paint and rusted gutters, I saw the way she held her breath, like she was embarrassed for me to see it. "You want to come in?" she asked, surprising us both. "I mean, just for a minute. Liam needs to warm up." I nodded once. "Sure." Inside, the apartment was small but neat. The heat clanked loudly through the vents. A thrift store couch sat against one wall, a hand-me-down baby crib tucked into the corner of the same room. Everything smelled like lavender detergent, and desperation scrubbed clean. "I'd offer you coffee," she said, shrugging, "but all I've got is cereal and toddler snacks." "This is fine," I said. "Better than most places I've been." She raised an eyebrow. "I thought guys like you lived in penthouses with espresso machines and skyline views." I gave a half smile. "I do, but it's quiet. Sometimes too quiet." She pulled off Liam's jacket, revealing a onesie with a faded bear print. The kid reached for her necklace, a tiny silver cross, worn at the edges, and she kissed his forehead absent-mindedly. "Your husband?" I asked gently. Her back stiffened. "No husband," she said. "Liam's father didn't stick around. Found out I was pregnant and vanished. Denied everything. Hired a lawyer to scare me off." Anger flickered in her voice, but mostly it was exhaustion. The kind that doesn't ask for sympathy, just space to breathe. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. She looked up, studying me for a long moment. "Why did you pay for the clinic visit?" I froze. She smiled slightly. "The receptionist told me," said a tall man in a black coat with sad eyes, paid for everything and slipped out before she could ask his name. I let out a breath. "Didn't do it for credit." "I know," she said quietly. "That's why it mattered." Silence settled between us again. Not awkward, something else. Something fragile. Liam started fussing, rubbing his eyes. Rachel moved to pick him up, cradling him gently. "You're the first man who's ever come back," she said without looking at me. Not even to stay, just to care. I didn't have an answer for that, but I knew, in that moment, that I wasn't leaving this story behind. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because the echo of her voice sounded like something I'd forgotten I was looking for. A week passed, then another. I found myself dropping by more often, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with nothing but time. I'd make up excuses, said I had business nearby, or I needed to get out of the office. But the truth was simpler. I wanted to see her. Rachel. She didn't ask for anything, never once. But I noticed the way her eyes softened every time I showed up. The way Liam would crawl toward the door when he heard my knock. The way her shoulders, always drawn tight like she was waiting for the next blow, began to ease. It became a routine. Quiet dinners, walks to the corner store, coffee on her fire escape. It felt natural, dangerous, maybe, but natural. One evening, we sat across from each other at her chipped kitchen table. Liam was asleep in the crib. The window was cracked open, letting in a breeze that smelled like dust and distant rain. Rachel stirred sugar into a mug of instant coffee. "Can I ask you something?" she said, not quite looking at me. "Of course. Why are you really here?" I leaned back. "You want the polished version or the real one?" "The real one." I nodded. Because I spent too long building something cold. Something tall and clean and admired but empty. I thought it would fill the space my nephew left behind. But it didn't. And then one day, I saw you, in that storm, holding your boy. And I realized. I knew that look. I knew that fight. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Sometimes, I still think I'm invisible." "You're not," I said. "Not to me." Her eyes glistened, but she blinked it away. We sat in silence after that, the kind that wraps around two people who've seen too much and still choose to stay. I thought that would be the moment I remembered most from that night. It wasn't. It was what happened 5 minutes later. We were talking about Liam's clinic bills, the ones I'd quietly taken care of again, though I hadn't told her yet when she said, "His father was supposed to help. He promised. But you know how promises go." I nodded slowly. "You ever think about taking him to court?" "I did," she said, voice hardening. "But then his lawyer made it clear I'd be buried in paperwork and threats, that I didn't stand a chance." "What's his name?" I asked. She hesitated. "Why? I just like to know who makes women like you feel powerless." She exhaled. "Marcus Langston." The room went very, very still. It took me a second to process the name. A second longer to realize I'd said it aloud. "Marcus?" She looked up, startled by my reaction. I stared at her. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Marcus Langston. Works in finance. Big company. Lives in some condo downtown." "Why?" I leaned back in my chair, blood draining from my face. "Because he's my CFO. Rachel's eyes widened. "What?" "I own Ellis Financial," I said quietly. "Marcus has been with me for 6 years." She looked like she couldn't breathe. "You know him?" "I trusted him," I said. "I gave him everything." She stood up, suddenly restless. "I didn't know. I swear, I had no idea." "I believe you." She stared at me, torn between panic and confusion. "You really didn't know?" "No," I said, my voice low. "But now that I do, I need to ask you something." She nodded, arms crossed tightly. "Would you be willing to tell me everything? Not as a confession, but as a record?" She hesitated. I added, "Because something's been off with Marcus for a while. Financial discrepancies, delays, sloppy files. I didn't know what he was hiding. Now, I have a pretty good idea." Rachel stared at me, pale and silent. "Are you saying," she whispered, "that he stole from you and abandoned his kid at the same time?" "Maybe worse," I said. "Maybe he's been using company projects to cover it all up." She sat down again, slowly. "I kept everything," she said. "Emails, messages, threats." My jaw clenched. "I want to see them." She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something shift in her. Hope, or maybe something fiercer. "I'll show you everything," she said. "But if we do this, we do it all the way." "All the way," I agreed. Because this wasn't just about a baby. This was about betrayal. And the first ember of justice, still small, still smoldering, had just been lit. It had been years since I looked a man in the eyes and knew, with certainty, I'd once called him a friend and now saw him for exactly who he was. Marcus Langston, CFO of Ellis Financial. My right hand, my sounding board. The man I'd once trusted with contracts, budgets, internal memo shell, with the direction of everything I'd built from the ground up. And now, he sat across from me in the conference room like nothing had changed. "You wanted to talk, Jordan?" he said casually, leaning back in the leather chair like it belonged to him. "You look serious." I didn't respond right away. I studied him. The expensive watch, the pressed collar, the charm, it all still fit, but underneath that polish was something rotten. And I had the proof. In my hands I held the folder Rachel had given me. Emails, threats, financial documents, all tracing back to him. Behind the mirror on the wall, what he didn't know was a one-way pane. Rachel stood watching. She was nervous. I knew that. But she said she wanted to see how far he'd go. Not out of vengeance, out of closure. I slid the folder across the table. Marcus flipped it open with a smirk that faded by the 3rd page. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. "You tell me," I said. He looked up. "Where'd you get this?" "From her." His jaw clenched. "Her who?" "You know damn well." Silence. I leaned forward, voice quiet, cold. "You abandoned your child, Marcus. And you didn't just walk away, you threatened the mother, tried to buy her silence, then laundered company money to cover your tracks. You can't prove that," he snapped, sitting upright now. "I don't need to prove it," I said. "You already did." I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward him. A spreadsheet loaded bank transfers, shell corporations, timestamps. Money moved from our community housing project straight into consulting firms with no employees, no websites, no existence. His voice dropped, defensive. This is business. You think any of your Golden Boy projects get done clean? You think anyone in this city builds without grease? This wasn't grease, I said. This was theft. From the people you were supposed to help. From a woman you used and a child you never even met. He scoffed. So what? You fall in love with some broke girl from Rose Hill and now you're the patron saint of single moms? No, I said calmly. But I remember what it felt like to lose someone I loved because I didn't act in time. I'm not making that mistake again. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. What are you gonna do, Jordan? He challenged. Fire me? I already did. The door opened. 2 security guards entered. Marcus stood, stunned. You serious? Check your email, I said. It's official. Legal already has the documents. Your access is revoked. You'll be escorted out. He turned toward the mirror still, unaware of what was behind it, and spat. She did this. That girl. She turned you. No, I said. You turned yourself. He was halfway to the door when I added. And Marcus? He paused. His name is Liam. He didn't respond. Just clenched his fists and walked out with the guards flanking him. I stood alone for a moment. The room felt cold, hollow, but I wasn't empty. Rachel entered quietly from the side door. She didn't speak, just walked to the chair he'd left and sat down, placing her palms on the table like she needed to ground herself. He didn't even flinch when I was mentioned, she said, more to herself than me. Because he never saw you as real, I said. But now he knows better. She looked at me, her voice tight. And what happens now? I didn't have a full answer yet, but I knew one thing. We rebuild, I said, and this time, we do it right. She nodded slowly, then stood, walked toward the window. The city stretched beyond the glass, noisy, messy, imperfect. But for the first time in a long time, we weren't just surviving it. We were taking it back. There's something different about a place when you know no one can take it from you. I stood in the doorway of Rachel's new apartment at Fairview Residences, holding a set of keys still warm from her palm. She just handed them to me without a word, then stepped inside, barefoot on the freshly cleaned floors, like she was testing whether the ground beneath her was real. It was. The sunlight spilled across the hardwood like honey, touching everything: the second-hand couch, the box of Liam's toys in the corner, the baby monitor blinking quietly on the kitchen counter. The scent of paint was still faint in the air, but it mixed with something warmer: life. I set the box I was carrying on the counter. Rachel turned to me, her face flushed, a few loose strands of hair stuck to her cheek. You didn't have to come, she said. You keep saying that, I replied. And I keep showing up anyway. She smiled, soft, tired, but real. Liam toddled in from the hallway, dragging a plush dinosaur in one hand, his footy pajamas bunched at the ankle. He pointed at me and giggled, wobbling over and crashing into my leg like it was a game. I crouched to scoop him up. Man, you're getting heavy, I said, grinning as he buried his face in my neck. Rachel watched us, her hands still resting on her hips, like she didn't know what to do with herself now that no one was trying to take something from her. I understood that look. I'd worn it once. You okay? I asked. She nodded. I think so. I don't remember the last time I felt safe. Then let this be the first. She looked around slowly. It's small. It's yours. And she blinked quickly and turned away like she was checking something on the stove, but I knew the truth: she was hiding tears. Not from sadness, from the shock of finally being allowed to exhale. We had dinner on the floor, Chinese takeout and apple slices for Liam. No fancy tablecloth, no wine glasses, just a paper bag and plastic forks. But it felt like a feast. You know, she said between bites, I used to think love only came with conditions. I looked up. What do you mean? She shrugged. That it showed up when you were pretty enough, or quiet enough, or convenient enough. But it always ran out when life got messy. I didn't respond right away, just listened. But you came when it was already messy, she said, voice low. You didn't run when you saw the wreckage. You just started sweeping the floor. I reached across and took her hand. I didn't do any of this because I expected something in return, Rachel, I said. I did it because it felt right, because you're worth it. She looked at me for a long time, and in that silence, I felt something shift, not a thunderbolt, not some cinematic kiss, just something steady and certain, like the world had stopped running, just for a moment, to let us catch up. Later, after Liam was asleep and the boxes were pushed aside, we stood on the tiny balcony outside her bedroom. The city shimmered beneath us, soft and far away. I used to hate this city, she said quietly. Too loud, too fast, too full of people who looked right through me. And now? She turned to me. Now, it feels like home. I didn't say anything, just slipped my arm around her shoulder and let the quiet stretch. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive with declarations. It arrives with help lifting boxes, with laughter during takeout, with a baby sleeping nearby, and a woman realizing she no longer has to walk alone. That night, as I closed her door behind me and stepped into the hallway, I realized something else. Peace doesn't come when the world stops attacking. It comes the moment you stop expecting to be hurt and start believing someone will stay. It was raining that morning, not a violent storm, just a steady drizzle that made the streets of Atlanta shimmer like polished glass. I had just finished a morning meeting at the community center, the kind I used to avoid but now looked forward to. It felt good to be around people who believed in second chances. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw them, Rachel and Liam, standing on the porch of my brownstone, soaked and shivering under a tiny umbrella. Her other hand clutched a small suitcase. Liam was wrapped in his red dinosaur hoodie, his lip trembling. I got out of the truck and jogged toward them. What happened? I asked, already knowing it had to be something bad. Rachel tried to smile, but it broke before it even formed. I didn't know where else to go. I stepped aside without a word and held the door open. Inside, she sat on the couch while I got towels and made hot cocoa. Liam was already curled up with a blanket, cartoons flickering across the screen. Rachel didn't speak until I sat down beside her. He showed up again, she said. At the daycare. Said he wanted to talk. Her voice shook. She didn't have to say his name. I knew exactly who she meant, her ex. The man who had once nearly torn her life apart. The man who gave up his parental rights, then came slithering back when she'd finally rebuilt a piece of herself. I told him to leave, she continued. Told the director too, but he waited outside. My jaw clenched. Did he touch you? Number. But his words, they were enough. She paused. He said I was pathetic, that no man was going to stick around for someone like me, that you'd get bored and disappear like everyone else. I exhaled slowly. You know that's not true. I want to believe that, she whispered. But when someone spends years convincing you that you're disposable, it's hard to believe you're anything else. I looked at her then, really looked, at the fear behind her eyes, the exhaustion behind her spine, the quiet ache of someone who'd spent too long being dismissed, erased, overlooked, and I did something I hadn't done before. I reached for her hand. I'm not here to fix you, Rachel, I said. I'm here to stay, and no man who walks away gets to define your worth. You're not broken. You're rebuilding. She stared at our hands, her thumb trembling slightly against mine. I don't want to be afraid anymore, she said. Then let's stop being afraid together. She looked at me, really looked, and something unspoken passed between us. Not passion, not desire, trust. That evening, we cooked dinner together in my small kitchen. Liam banged wooden spoons against the tile, singing nonsense songs while Rachel chopped vegetables beside me. It was chaotic and messy and full of laughter, and it felt like a dream I didn't know I'd been chasing. After we ate, Rachel stepped out onto the porch with a blanket around her shoulders. I joined her, 2 mugs of tea in hand. This house, she said softly, it doesn't feel temporary. It's not. She turned to me, eyes wide. What are you saying? I hesitated, then answered. I'm saying you're welcome to stay. For as long as you want. No clock ticking, no expectations. Just space to breathe. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't blink them away. You're the first man who ever made me feel visible, she said. Like I'm not just surviving, like I could live. And you deserve that. She nodded, and for the first time, I saw her shoulders ease, like she'd set down a weight she didn't even realize she was carrying. That night, After Liam had fallen asleep in the guest room and the house had gone quiet, Rachel turned to me in the hallway. "If I stay," she said, "it's not because I need saving. I wouldn't have it any other way." And then, without ceremony or fanfare, she leaned in and kissed me, not to claim, not to promise, but to acknowledge that something had shifted, that trust had grown roots. It was the kind of kiss that doesn't end with a door closing. It begins with one opening. And in that moment, I knew, whatever road lay ahead, we were walking it together. No more shadows, no more running, only the quiet, certain beginning of something whole.